accepted that information. He's not here. Because that's what somebody told them. And they then went. If you follow the writings in the scripture, you'll find that he went back to where all the apostles were gathered. He had told Mary to tell them that he would be there. And they all gathered together waiting for him to come, and he came. Now, his interest was very interesting, because he did not come walking open through the door. He came through the door without opening the door. Now, I would think that if someone came through the door without opening the door, I probably would have gotten up and started running through the door that should have been open. But they sat there, and he began to talk to them, began to minister to them, letting them know that even though he had been martyred, he was martyred for his own reasons. Now, please understand that, there's this thing that we have, many people have a hatred for the Jews. Jews didn't kill Jesus. They might have instigated it to the Romans, but the Romans were the one who killed Jesus. The Romans were the one who nailed him to the cross. The Romans did that because, as you recall, Jesus rode into, in what we call Palm Sunday, rode into Jerusalem, and they were saying, King of the Jews. That's what the people were saying. Hosanna, save us. And the Jewish clergy heard that, because they were already losing people in their membership, but they were losing more people to the ministry that Jesus was giving. And this is really what this time is all about. This time is all about letting us know that there's a rising consciousness. And we have to understand that this resurrection is not a physical resurrection to us, but it's an idea of a risen consciousness. We have to have our consciousness rise. We have to know that it is risen. We have to know that as we raise our consciousness to another level, we begin to see things differently. Yes. We begin to understand that we can do all that we want to do in our life. That nothing can prohibit us except us. We're the ones that inhibit us from achieving the goals that we want to achieve. We're the ones that do that. Know that there is nothing else that can do us, that can hinder us from our own conscious living. Know that the whole idea, I believe, of the risen Christ is the rising of Christ in our consciousness. And when we know that it is the rising of Christ in our consciousness is the whole idea of Christmas, then we recognize that it's all there. This whole idea of the tree, thank you, Sandra. The whole idea of the tree decorated was being done long before Jesus came. It was done by the tree worshippers, by the sun worshippers, the sun Numerians. They were decorating trees and giving presents long before Jesus came around. And what was done by the Catholic Church, they incorporated that into something they call Christ's Mass, in order to incorporate those, quote, pagans, the ones who were decorating trees and the ones that were doing all this stuff. And they wanted us to know that they were celebrating the birth of Christ, the death of Christ, the resurrection of Christ. But know that Jesus didn't need to have them resurrected. And he had already done it. Those trees being decorated was done by the Santararians years before Jesus was born. And so when we can recognize that that is the thing about the tree, that has nothing to do with it. But they made it something about Jesus. The Catholic Church began to say that we're going to call it Christ's Mass. Christmas. And Christ's Mass was to take the part of when Jesus arose. But the decorating of the trees and giving presents was a result of the sun worshipers who gave gifts because they recognized that that the sun was returning. You know, that was pretty smart cookies. They knew that the sun had gone someplace and it was on the way back. And they gave gifts to satisfy the return of the sun. This is something that we really ought to know. We really ought to know what Christmas is all about. Even though we celebrate Christmas and give those gifts, understand this is not something that's new. It was being done thousands of years before it was named Christ's Mass. It was done by the Centenarians, the sun worshipers. Know that a lot of things that we celebrate now, is a result of the Christmas thing. And as far as the Easter thing, yes, Jesus was martyred. He was on the cross. And he was put into the grave. And as he had said to the Jewish leaders, I'm going to destroy this temple. But on the third day, I'm going to rebuild this temple. In other words, you're not keeping this in this grave. There's a song that my aunt, my favorite aunt who died recently, she was over 95. But the church she went to was a sanctified church. And they used to sing a song, "Ain't no grave gonna hold my body down." And I thought, hey, that's interesting. No grave gonna hold the body down. I was a little boy. But they meant it. There was no grave gonna hold their body down. And that's what they truly believe. Because that's what Jesus said. This grave is not a hold my body. But see, the grave did hold the body. But the grave did not hold the soul. The grave did not hold the life. It returned back to the life giver. And the life giver is the one that the Apostle Paul later in Acts chapter 17 that talks about in him we live and move and have our being. This is the kind of thing that we need to understand about these things. Yes, let's celebrate. Let's celebrate these holidays in unison with the people who are doing it. But let us know that it is not for the same reason that they are doing it. Let us know that we are doing it because we are joining into that celebration. But also let us know that we know that Christ has arisen. But the important thing is the rising of Christ in our own consciousness. Get the key. The rising of Christ is the point that Christ is being is rising in our own consciousness. And when we recognize that we are allowing Christ to rise in our consciousness, that's the life that's going to give us the most profit, going to give us most of everything. It's all up to us. We can celebrate it and we can talk about the Easter bunny and the Easter egg. I was at therapy last Thursday, I believe it was. I was there, and the person who was administering my punishment said that he didn't go to church. He said, I was born a Catholic. My wife was born a Catholic, but we don't attend the church except on Easter. I said, oh. He said, yeah, we attend because that's when the mass of people attend. So we attend once a year. I tried to get him to come to Agape, but he said his wife wouldn't approve of that. They're out in Tremont, and he said there is a Catholic church out near us that we will attend. And we will hide some Easter eggs, and I didn't ask him about the Easter eggs or the Easter bunny because I knew that based on what he had told me, that he had no idea what he was doing. See, he hadn't heard Sandra Bishop. He hadn't heard what this Easter egg and the bunny was all about. He hadn't heard that. So I'm sure he was doing it out of custom. Hiding the egg and hiding the bunny and having candy and all of that. It's good, to give the children that. But don't get caught up in it so that you begin to believe that it is really because of the birth of Jesus, of the resurrection of the Christ. Understand, if you get nothing else from this sermon, nothing else from Easter, that it is the Christ being risen in your consciousness. That's the purpose of it, and that's what it is. And when we can understand that that's it, then we can go away rejoicing. We can go away rejoicing just as Mary Magdalene said. And she ran back to the apostles. He's alive! He's alive! Because I've seen him. I've just seen Jesus. And when you can go and say that in your own consciousness, you will go and recognize that everything is working out for you in your life, in your world, and everywhere else. Understand that you're the one who can do this. You can allow the Christ present to rise in your own consciousness and let it happen for you. Now, I guess she's asleep, huh? Yeah. When I came in, the little one says, I want to ask a question. And I said that she could ask the question. Well, if she's asleep, let her stay asleep. But let us know. Join me in prayer. Father God, we're so grateful for another opportunity to give you thanks, to praise you. To know that the risen Christ means that the consciousness of Christ has arisen in our own consciousness. And we can live the kind of life that Jesus talked about. We can live those things in our lives. And know that all is well because we are in consciousness with the Creator. That when we make our transition, we've gone back to God, the one who made us, and in whom we live and move and have our being. That's what happens. There's no heaven or no hell. Just understand that we all return back to the consciousness of the presence of God that created us all. When we get to that consciousness, we then know that we are begin to master